Is the selector not even working? I might not save this. That could be it. Yes, that's it. Okay, I didn't save HTML. I was wondering what was happening. It's still doing.
All right, good morning, guys. Let's go ahead and get started. Today we're going to kind of jump back and talk about HTML just for a few minutes. We've got a couple of HTML5 elements to go over that we haven't gone over yet in class. These are mostly structural elements. They're kind of some newer elements that have been added that kind of give us some extra tools to work with, so we'll talk about that. And then we'll dive into web design principles and start talking about how to make our website look good. And some different design trends and stuff like that. And then we'll just get as far as we can in that, and then we'll wrap that up on Thursday. Okay, so HTML5 elements. So again, HTML5, it's been in development for quite a few years now, really, but it's kind of slowly being adopted. It's not even 100% final yet, the spec, but the browsers are slowly adding it, but we're at a point now where most HTML5 features we can use in all browsers for the most part. IE is really the only concern. Anything, below. IE 9 has a few really minor issues. IE 8 starts to have some major problems. But at this point, IE 8 is not used near as much, and so mostly in large corporations is the main problem you have to worry about. So one of the really nice things that HTML5 has added is several new elements that provide a more descriptive and semantic structure for HTML. So far we've just used divs for everything, right? So like our website's kind of become a mess of divs, right? You use divs to group, elements together. Div doesn't mean anything. It doesn't really provide any structure other than being a useful tag. So now we have some more elements that are very similar to divs. They function exactly the same as divs, but they give us more interesting tag names to use to kind of be a little bit more descriptive of our content. And again, a cleaner, easier to understand structure through HTML. These elements function exactly the same as divs, so they're block level by default, and there's no default styling or associated behavior with them. They're essentially just another name for a div that's a little bit more useful. So again, they should be used where they make sense. They're kind of tools in the toolbox. There's no hard rules for their usage. You can use them kind of however makes the most sense for your website. So again, they're just kind of tools. Use them in a way that makes sense. So first is header. So this can be used to wrap multiple elements that make up a site's header. So again, rather than using like div id equals header or something along those lines, now we just have a header tag. It functions the same as a div. It's just a way to group all of our header elements together. And this header can be, again, whatever makes sense for your website. Sometimes we'll use it for like a fixed navigation bar at the top, like Facebook has like a clear header. You might use it for just like if you have like a header, heading and an image or something, you could use it for that. Like for instance, on this page, the header could be this big blue bar. That could be the header tag because it's sort of the header to the page, right? So again, it's really flexible, kind of whatever you want to use it for, whatever to you constitutes the header of your page, you can use the header tag for. So again, here we've got, an H1 and a paragraph and a link in there that make up that header. Nav is another useful tag. It can be used to wrap navigation elements. or to wrap a navigation section for your page. So again, you might use the nav for your header bar at the top if you have like a menu bar. Really either kind of can work, just depending on whatever makes most sense to you. If you have a separate header section, you can also use a nav for navigation within a sidebar, some other type of navigation list. Anything that you think of as a navigation section on your page, you can use a nav for that. And again, you can have more than one too, and same goes for header. They're not, you're not restricted to only using it once. It's just like a div. You can have multiple headers on your page. You can have multiple navs on your page. Again, it's just a more descriptive tag than a div. So in this case, we've just got a couple of links. We've wrapped that in nav rather than like div class equals nav or something like that. Section is also really useful. It can be used to wrap elements that comprise a large section of your website. So, here we've got section. So if you're thinking about your city guide, maybe you've got a list of restaurants. So this is a good example. So we use the section tag to, indicate this is a section of our page. This is a large group of content that we're calling the restaurant section. Within that, we're still using divs maybe for each restaurant, right? So like each restaurant is a div with a class, and then there's some more information inside that div, a heading and a picture and what have you. But this, rather than having div here and then div here, this kind of makes it a little bit more clear what's going on. We have a section. It's a lot more clear when we close it that we're closing the entire section, not just if this is just /div, you're like, okay, well, does this div relate to this div? It gets a little bit trickier. So by using these HTML5 elements, it's a lot more clear when you're closing a section or closing a header or whatever that closing tag is related to that element. So again, use it however you want. You can have multiple sections on your page. It's just a more useful, a more descriptive tag than just div. Article, we typically will use for any repeating types of elements. So like a blog post, articles, comments, etc. Anything that you'll have multiple of that look the same, if that makes sense. So if you've got a type of content that you will have repeated on your site, and each time it's repeated, it looks the same, it looks similar, it has the similar content in it, we would use article for that. So again, a blog post is the common example. We have two blog posts here. Each one is an article. They can each also have an ID. It could be blog post 1, blog post 2, whatever. But they're each articles. They have some content inside them. Again, the article is kind of indicating that it's a piece of repeating content. We have multiple of them. So like if it's a discussion forum website, you might use articles for your each post in the discussion forum, something like that, when you have repeating content. Aside, we will use for content that's tangentially related to the main content of your page, but should be displayed separate from it. So it's most often used for a sidebar. That's kind of the clearest example. Kind of going along with the blog idea. So say we have a blog post, we've got several articles for each blog post. We might have an aside that says previous blog posts, and a link to our previous blog post, right? So this is content that, it's not an article, right? Like we've got several articles, it's a separate type of content, and it's tangentially related to our main content, but it should be displayed differently somehow. So a lot of times we'd use that for a sidebar. It doesn't necessarily have to be a sidebar. That's okay. It could be, just shown below your blog post. Like sometimes the blog will have like 5 blog posts, and then at the end, below all the blog posts, there's like, okay, here's a link to other blog posts you might be interested in. That could be an aside. It doesn't have to be a sidebar. It's just anything that's tangentially related should be displayed a little bit differently. But often if you have like blog posts and then you have like a sidebar over here, you'd use an aside for that. H group is kind of an interesting one. We can use it to contain multiple headings that are related together. So say you've got like a main heading, like a title for your blog post, it's an H1, and then maybe you've got an H2 with the author information. So your byline, it's by whoever. Maybe you also have like a date in here. Maybe you have a profile image of the author, something along those lines. Anything that constitutes a heading, we could use that H group to wrap multiple elements that make up that heading, right? So we see this a lot, again, thinking of your blog posts. You might have an image of the author, you've got your title, you've got some metadata information, you've got like a permalink, whatever. Those are all heading types of elements, right? But you don't necessarily want to put multiple things like that inside an H1. Your H1 should just be text. So you can use H group to kind of wrap multiple elements that all make up your heading on your page, or within an article or whatever. We already talked about figure and fig caption a little bit when we talked about images, but again, they're just ways to wrap an image and its caption or any other information that needs to go along with that image. So we've got figure, inside it we've got an image, and we've got fig caption that provides the caption to that image. So again, this gives us one element that we can use to move around it. We could use div here and it would function exactly the same, right? You could use div to wrap an image, and you could use paragraph for your fig caption or a span or whatever, and then close your div. And you can move that div around. You could set the dimensions of that div. You could add a border around that div. It functions exactly the same, but by using figure here, it's a little bit more clear that what we have going on is an image and some related caption. So again, it's just more descriptive than just a div. One nice thing too is these give screen readers a lot more contextual information about your content, right? So as a screen reader is reading the content, it's not just like div, here's some content, div, here's some content. It's like, okay, figure, here's an image, here's the alt for that image, here's the fig caption that goes along with that image. So it kind of provides a little more contextual information to screen readers. And it's just easier to edit. Like when you're scrolling through, you guys are probably already running into this with your City Guide website, is you're trying to find where you put certain things and you're scrolling through and all you see are divs. Like, okay, and you have to look for the IDs. Okay, here's that ID. Okay, here's where I'm looking. When you're using these HTML5 elements, it just makes it a little bit easier to see the structure of your page when you're editing it. It just makes it a little bit cleaner. Okay, that's the end. Those are all the HTML5 elements, at least that we'll talk about. I thought I had an example. Let me see the there's an example page that the HTML CSS book has. Let's see. So here's kind of an example web page. They're using HTML5 elements for this, so I'll show what that looks like here in a second. But you can kind of start to imagine, right? Like you've got a header here, probably. You've got a nav here, probably. These would be articles. This would be an aside, maybe. Maybe even a nav too. Maybe this whole section is your aside. Maybe this is a nav, and then this is just a regular div. You've got a heading group here, maybe, because you've got kind of a main heading and a subheading, so maybe those are wrapped in a heading group. You've got obviously a figure and a fig caption here, so you can kind of start to see where these elements make sense. So let's look at the actual HTML they used. So again, like for instance, if we do view source and just look at the HTML on its own, it makes a little more sense. You have some more contextual information. You can kind of start to imagine what the page looks like just by looking at the HTML, right? So like we see a header. Okay, so like this content is probably at the top of the page. It's structured as a header. We've got a nav here with this UL for our navigation items. We see we've got the section with class courses. We've got an article figure. They do use the H groups for their heading and subheading. We can see, okay, we've got 2 articles here. Once we see this aside, we can kind of imagine that that's probably going to be a sidebar, right? Without even looking at the CSS. It's like, okay, there's an aside there. That's probably a sidebar. We've got a section for the popular recipes, then a section for the contact details. So again, both of those are kind of wrapped within the aside because all of this content is tangential and it's kind of displayed a little bit differently. So we've used an aside for that. There's also a footer. We actually didn't talk about that. There's also a footer element that you can use. I'll have to add that to the slides before I post it on Blackboard. So again, footer, same thing as header, except just footer instead of header. So any content that would be considered a footer to your page, you can put inside a footer tag. Okay, those are HTML5 elements. There's a handful of other ones, but these are kind of the main ones that we use kind of on a daily basis. So I can't remember if one of the objectives on the current city guide assignment is to add some of the HTML5 elements in there. Can't remember if I had that listed as the objectives or not. But one thing that might be useful is to go through your HTML and just start to replace some of your divs with HTML5 elements where it makes sense. And you might have to still have IDs on them, and you target them in your CSS the same way you target other elements too, right? So you can write a CSS rule, and there might even be some in here. Like if we look at this article, there's a CSS rule here that targets the articles. So your CSS is the same as with other tags. So again, that kind of saves you from, you might have to do div class equals article. This saves you. You can just do article and then just target the article. So it kind of makes things a little bit more simple with your CSS. So. Okay, any questions about these elements? Again, they're kind of interchangeable for divs. There's no hard and fast rules to how you want to use them. It's kind of up to you. It's kind of contextual too. So like we've got a header here, but you could also use, if you had a blog post, and maybe each blog post has something of a header to it, you can use the header tag within an article to say, okay, here's a header within my blog post to kind of structure it that way if you want to. Again, it's totally up to you, however makes the most sense to use it within your page. Okay, let's start talking about design principles. So that's kind of all the information after we finish talking about layout, which if you missed last Thursday, one of your objectives for the assignment is to do some column layout stuff with your city guide. So you might want to jump back and look at the slides from last week. I'll make sure I get them posted if I haven't yet. But to figure out how to do some column layouts on your website for your city guide. And again, the number of columns is up to you. Just kind of, you need to be able to show that you can use, percentages or to use widths and floats to create, content that's structured like a column. So this stuff is kind of adding on to, we're not going to worry about, adding these kinds of design principles to your city guide. It's kind of more on for the next assignment. You'll have to worry about these design principles. So, okay, so design principles. So these are kind of going to be some more high-level ideas about kind of relating to art a little bit. I don't know if we have any art majors in here. You guys might be more knowledgeable on this stuff than I am. But we're going to kind of talk about how some of these principles of what makes good art can help inform our websites and make our websites more usable and more readable and more effective at getting our content into the minds of our users, right? So like our whole point of a website is to have some impact, right? Whether that impact is to get someone to buy something, maybe we're trying to sell something, maybe we're selling ourselves, maybe we're trying to get people to think highly of us with a personal website. Like we want to use every tool that we have to wrap up in our design some sort of sales pitch, right? So we're going to kind of talk about some higher level principles and ideas that we can implement that will help improve the way that our websites are effective, essentially, make our websites more effective. So the first principle to talk about is dominance. So dominance will create visual interest by drawing the viewer's eye to an important element on the page. So this is how we make certain elements of our website stand out and kind of draw the user's eye to them. So dominant elements are the first thing your eyes are drawn to, like a magnet. So whatever's most dominant on a page is kind of what your attention gets drawn to first. So dominance is really useful for establishing a visual hierarchy of information. So when we think about our web page, and we'll talk more about visual hierarchy, but we want to think about like what's most important on our page, what's secondly important, what's thirdly important. Kind of think about what the hierarchy of your information is. What's the main thing you want the user to do? What's kind of a secondary thing you want the user to do? And we use dominance to kind of establish that on our page, to make it clear what our main goal is, what our secondary goals are. So how do we create dominance on our website? One way is by contrast, the lightest or the darkest element. So, you know, if we have a white background and we have some black text, that contrast there creates some dominance and makes those elements more important. We can also use size, so the biggest element on our page. So that's why headings are larger by default, because they should have some dominance, they should have some importance to them. We use size to do that. We can also use white space. This is probably the biggest thing that has an impact that maybe isn't the first thing you would think about. The biggest thing you can do to make your websites look better and to help improve kind of the dominance and the structure of your page is by adding white space. Space things out a little more. If something is given a lot of space, a lot of white space around it, it becomes more dominant. It becomes more important on your page because it's almost like it scares the other elements away, right? Like it has space attributed to it, so it must be important because it's taking up lots of space. Even if that space is white space, it still is pretty clear that that's what's most important because there's space around it. Also placement. So, you know, putting elements in important locations on your website can help improve the dominance. So we talked about like above the fold, everything in the top 600 pixels or so of your site is kind of the most important area. So anything up there is going to have some dominance associated with it. So we're going to kind of refer back to this piece of art a little bit to just kind of illustrate some examples kind of from the art world. So in your guys' minds, what are the most dominant elements in this artwork? Does anyone want to point out anything? Yeah. Exactly. Why? What kinds of things? Or did you say the red umbrella, or this one? The middle one. Yeah, absolutely. And they're kind of both dominant. You know, there's kind of these two ladies, but yeah, this one's kind of the most dominant for a couple of reasons. Size, obviously, she's not the biggest, but she's pretty big. Contrast, right? So like the use of color, like that color it's really prominent, especially, you know, compared to its surroundings. Also just placement on the page. She's right in the middle. She's kind of the first thing you see. If we go to like secondary dominance, like obviously this over here, this couple is probably the second most dominant thing. Again, contrast, they're really dark, whereas, you know, their surroundings are a little bit lighter. Also very large. Again, it's not the largest is the most dominant, because we would think this is the most dominant because of the combination of all those things. But so like our eye, when we look at the piece, it pretty immediately goes here, and then it kind of quickly goes over here, because here's kind of our secondary dominance. So yeah, again, just showing placement on the page is important, contrast is important, size is important, and all those kind of combined make up what's most dominant. So here's kind of an example from an actual website. Slide updates. Seems to be paused. There we go. So here's a screenshot of a website. This is MailChimp, which is like an email service, like a newsletter designer and sender and stuff. So obviously the most dominant thing on this page is their heading here. The main thing they want to get across to you is what they do, which is build your brand and sell more stuff. And it's actually really fascinating. This is a great website. I encourage you to check it out. It's just MailChimp.com, I think. Should have included a link somewhere. Yeah, MailChimp.com. It's a really interesting, they put a lot of thought into their website, especially this landing page. Like, even their heading here doesn't exactly tell you what they do, right? Like, build your brand, sell more stuff. Okay, but what is it? But it's important, like, what they want you to understand about their company is that they help you build your brand and they help you sell more stuff. Who doesn't want that, right? Like, they've cast a vision for why you need their product without even telling you what the product is. It's pretty smart. So like any, marketer or any, CEO or like salesperson, go to this page, build your brand, sell more stuff. Okay, yeah, I want that. I want to sign up. Like, it's just kind of a no-brainer. Of course I want that. So that's what's dominant on the page, both by contrast. So this is the darkest text. Like, this other text here is a little bit lighter. This is the highest contrast element on the page because, there's slightly off-white background and they've got a really dark text. It's the largest text on the page. It's given a lot of white space, so, like, your eye isn't drawn anywhere else because there's white space. This is, there's so much white space around the page, your eye's immediately drawn to the element that the white space is around. It's also obviously centered. It's in a really prominent location. It's towards the top. You go to this website, you're not distracted by anything else. You don't even notice the navigation. You barely even notice, this is kind of the second most dominant element. Well, the second most dominant is the action they want you to take, which is important. Sign up free. Okay, like, even if you don't read this, but you want to sign up, that's great. They don't really care. You'll figure out what the product is as you go along. But so then the third most dominant thing would be the paragraph text here explaining what it is. So, build your brand, sell more stuff. Okay, I'm sold. Okay, cool, I can sign up free. Okay, so what is it? And now it's really clear where you go to see what it is. Okay, MailChimp is the largest marketing automation platform, blah, blah, blah. Still doesn't even tell exactly what it is, that it's about emails. But they've really done a good job of using dominance to clearly get across what their point is. So again, everything else on the page is secondary to what their main goal is. I think this is a bad example. So, like, what's the most dominant thing on this page? Anybody want to point that out? Yep. Yeah, exactly. Their sale information. Because it's the highest contrast, like, they've got this, red background and they've got white text. It's really prominently located on the page. It's within the top 600 pixels. It's the largest text. So, like, I hate this design. It bothers me because, like, you go to it and the first thing you see, 50% off plus 40% off. Okay, cool, they're doing a sale. But it doesn't tell me what it is. It doesn't tell me why I should be interested. It doesn't tell me why I should want 50% off. Now, that said, if their primary audience is returning users, like, maybe they're not so concerned about telling people what Shutterfly is as much as they are generating renewal sales. So, like, they're assuming everyone comes to Shutterfly.com knowing what Shutterfly is, but what they instead want you to do is to hook you to make a purchase. Then this is a good strategy, right? Like, if you say, oh, I wonder, like, I'm kind of interested in buying something off Shutterfly, you go to Shutterfly.com, 50% off. Oh, I guess I'll buy something, right? So, like, they do help you make that decision pretty quickly. So they're making a huge assumption, which is that you already know what Shutterfly is by the time you've gotten here, because the most dominant thing on their page is their sale. But still, I don't like it because for other users, it's not useful. Now, and again, to get into, to get even more into it and more kind of marketing strategies, they may already know that I've been to Shutterfly.com before. They may also know how I got to their website. Like, they may know that I Googled, like, photo printing and that Shutterfly was the top result and I clicked it. So they may already know that I'm coming with some idea of what Shutterfly is. So you can actually have your website show different content based on these things, based on what the source of the traffic is. We won't get into how to do that. It requires JavaScript. But they may know that I have some idea. They may have a cookie in my browser that says, okay, this person has already purchased on Shutterfly. They may know I roughly spend $50 a month on Shutterfly. So that may be why they're showing me, this coupon in the most dominant way. But if you're just a regular, if this is the first time you've been to Shutterfly.com, I don't think this is the most effective design. And really, nowhere on this page does it show you what it is. Like, I mean, here with this image, I guess you can see this big book, and so maybe you get some idea that they allow you to print books. But even, like this heading here, this relive all of fall, one, it's not very descriptive. Two, this doesn't have much dominance, right? Like, this is a really poor design choice for this heading because you barely see it. Like, you see the coupon, then maybe the second most dominant thing would be this book, this image, just based on the size and the contrast that it's a visual interest. Honestly, I feel like this mug, and maybe that's one of their products, I don't even know. That sort of takes some dominance, but it's still confusing when it does. And then, yeah, this heading here doesn't stand out at all. Even this link here, Shop Photo Books, is pretty small comparative to their other content. So I don't think this is a great design unless, again, they know that I'm coming as a potential customer. They know that I know what they do. It's just kind of confusing. There's no clear visual hierarchy. They've used dominance, but I don't think they've used it in a clear and effective way. So, kind of an example. So again, using dominance, so like we've seen, use size, white space, contrast, and positioning to make your most important content stand out. So, things that are most important, your purpose statement, letting your users know what your website's about so that they have some idea whether they want to stick around, whether they're interested or not. If you go to this MailChimp website and they say, build your brand, sell more stuff, well, if I'm not trying to sell anything, I guess MailChimp's not for me. If I'm not trying to build a brand, I guess MailChimp's not for me. I'm going to move on. Like, if I was looking at MailChimp because I wanted to, I don't know, do something, something not related to building your brand or selling more stuff, they made it pretty clear that's not me. But if that is you, if that is what you're looking for, they've done a great job of capturing that as their most important thing. So your purpose statement is huge. And secondly, your calls to action. So something I'm going to try and hit over and over is that your website should have really clear calls to action. So what do you want your user to do? If your website doesn't have any actions on it, it may have some purpose as informative, but it's not really going to have an effect. It's almost like Wikipedia. Wikipedia is great as a resource. It's great. It's informative, but Wikipedia isn't really trying to get you to do anything. So if your goal is simply to inform people, that's great. Make Wikipedia, you don't need clear calls to action and effective use of design to drive the user to do something. But if you have some goal in mind, if you want the user to buy your product, if you want them to use your service, if you want them to hire you, you need calls to action to drive your user to engage with your site somehow. So calls to action should, again, use dominance. They're probably not the most dominant thing on your page because the user needs some context before they're pushed towards an action. But it should be probably the second or third most dominant thing on your page is your call to action. Sign up, learn more, view products, something along those lines. So again, we'll use decreasing dominance to help the user's attention flow to the rest of the content on your page in order of importance. So think about what's most important, what's second most important, third most, and start dialing back the dominance to make it clear what that hierarchy of information is. So again, less is more. Too much content or unclear dominance makes a site difficult to parse. It's really difficult to understand what the site's about, to see what options you have available to you. If you have too much content, or if you have unclear dominance. Again, that's my problem with the Shutterfly page, is that there's unclear dominance. There's honestly too much content. They've got this. I could go on, like it's just annoying to me. Like this kind of stands out, but again, it's reiterating the same thing. Say 50% off. I don't know. Like it's just not real clear what it's about. It's confusing. You're not sure where to go. Even if you wanted to, like presumably you could click on this, hopefully, and it would take you somewhere where you could purchase products. But even just, it's not super clear. You know, this is like the third or fourth most dominant thing on the page, and this is where you go to buy stuff. So that should probably be a little bit more prominent. But even then, I'm not sure what they have, so I'm not sure if I want to buy anything yet. I'm not sure why I should buy from them other than that it's 50% off. Maybe that's all it takes. I don't know. So again, less is more. That's what I love about the MailChimp site. Less is more. They're not overloading you with content. They're not, you know, there's really, really clear dominance, almost an extreme case of less content and more use of dominance. But it gets the point across. And if you're interested, you'll continue. If you're not interested, you're not going to waste any more time. So it's really effective. Okay, similarity. So we've talked about, you know, dominance, so making things stand out on our page. Similarity means that various properties of different elements are similar to one another in design. So these are ways that we make elements look similar. We make properties of elements similar. So, you know, the goal of dominance is to make things stand out, to make our visual hierarchy clear. Similarity we use to make your site appear more professional, more cohesive, more compelling. It gives kind of a polished and put together look to a website. So if you use similarity on your design, it helps it seem more professional, seem more thoughtful, because it's clear that things have been, you know, laid out a certain way and designed a certain way. It can help you group items that are similar as well. So helping the user understand when content is grouped together by making them appear similar kind of makes them grouped together. So again, similarity, we can use all kinds of things. We can use similar sizes, similar shapes, similar colors, line characteristics, similar textures, similar positions on the page, or positions within a container. You know, whatever makes sense that makes them look similar, we can use that. So again, kind of looking at this artwork again, there's a lot of similarity here, right? So like just the textures, the techniques involved, like the same technique is applied for the whole whole image. The, you know, whatever this painting style is, I don't know, impressionist, I guess. Is this impressionist? Any art majors? I don't really know art very well, so I'm kind of making this stuff up a little bit. But there's a lot of similarity. Even similar spaces between things. So like these trees are sort of spaced out similarly. It's not exact, but they're similar. There's similar spacing between like these people here. You know, like this space is the same as this space. There's some symmetry here. There's similar colors used, right? Like we see the same colors kind of repeated. The same kinds of shapes. You know, like the shape of this umbrella and the shape of this umbrella and the shape of this umbrella. They're similarly shaped, and that is part of what makes it interesting. It's part of what makes it look good, is that there's these repeated patterns, there's similar shapes. It kind of help makes it look good. So if we look at a website, so this is Bloomberg.com. There's a lot of similarity on this page, right? It's part of what makes it compelling and interesting. So obviously they've used the same colors for things. So they've got this, you know, bold color choice. They've used the same color. Like a good example is each of these stock tickers. There's a lot of similarity in the layout for the stock tickers. You know, you've got the heading, you've got your subheading, you've got your information here, and you've got this thing. That's, you know, it's really effective because you know when you see this layout, you know it's a stock ticker, you know exactly where to look for the information you want. If all you're interested in is, you know, the you know, percentage up or down, you know exactly where to look for that. Even though it's not very dominant, you know, there's similarity used, so you know exactly what to look for. There's similarity in other ways too. Like I really like the way they use this gradient from the orange to the purple. So they also use that on their images as kind of an overlay. So all all of their images kind of have this gradient applied to it, kind of over the top. So it's sort of like an overlay color that has this gradient on it. There's also similarity in these designs. Like each of these articles kind of has this image, and then it's got the heading and the start of the content, positioned similarly each way. So okay, here's an article, here's an article, here's an article. Like it's really clear that these are all articles. They're styled the same. Even the headings, like you have like the topic or the category up at the top, and then the heading. So it's that similarity is used to make it look more professional, make it look more clean, make it easier for the user to interact with because they kind of know what to expect. An example of what not to do would be this page. This is a subreddit. I can't remember what the name of the subreddit is. Crappy design, I think. I enjoy it because there's really good examples of crappy design and how crappy design can cause problems in your understanding or the meaning of the content. So this is a really terrible web design for lots of reasons. Their colors and images are bad, but it's really intentional. They have different fonts, for each title. It just looks bad, right? Like, it doesn't really affect usability. Like, you can still read the text, but it just looks poorly thought out. It looks like when you see different fonts, you're like, this is bad. Like, it looks lazy. It looks like a mistake. It looks like there's an error. It looks like there's something wrong with the page. It certainly doesn't look professional or clean or well designed. It just looks bad. No good similarity. Even like these alternating like this, the angle it looks bad. I don't know. It's not a good. There's no similarity in colors. Like they use like these colors up here for these tabs, but that's not used anywhere else. Like it's just only there is where that color is used. It doesn't really make sense. Again, it's kind of a joke, but it's a good example of what not to do. So again, using similarity, choose a color palette for your website and use the same colors consistently for certain types of elements. Use those colors throughout your site. So like headings and links or list items should all be the same color or similar colors. Again, they don't have to be the same. You can use contrasting colors or complementary colors for different types of elements, but all headings should probably be the same color, at least of a certain level. Keep consistent sizing of elements of the same type of content. So for example, maybe all of your images are 300 pixels by 300 pixels, or at least all images of a certain type. So like if you have a blog with blog posts, and each blog could have an image, make sure all those images are the same size. Maybe you have a profile image, too, of the author of the blog. That can be smaller, obviously, but all the profile images should also be the same size. So keep consistent sizing of elements. That's a huge thing that helps make your website look better. Use consistent margin, padding, and positioning of elements. Also huge. Don't just kind of, make up what padding and margin to use, on where each paragraph is different or different divs use different ones. Pick numbers that make sense, so say 10 pixels, and so you're going to consistently put 10 pixels of margin between all the elements on your page. And it doesn't have to be the same, universally, but make sure it's consistent and thought out. So your blog posts are all spaced out 20 pixels. But within your blog post, each paragraph is spaced out 10 pixels. Things like that. Like just make sure that you're consistent in the way that you apply them. A good way to do that too is using classes. So have a blog post class, have a paragraph class within your blog post or whatever, and apply styles to your classes. So you're not like writing a style for a specific blog post or a specific paragraph. Using classes to apply styles across types of elements is huge. Use consistent fonts. Again, so generally we want to use the same font across your whole website. That's kind of a classic design rule for your websites is to not mix fonts. You can get away with using a different font for headings maybe, So like maybe headings are one font and body text is another font. But if you are going to do that, you have to be really, really careful what types of fonts you're using. Make sure they look good together. So again, as a rule, just use the same font across your whole site. But if you want to, you can get away with mixing them sometimes. Okay, rhythm. So rhythm is really similar to similarity, but it refers more to like the organization and the placement and the repetition of elements on the page. So they're kind of, linked. Rhythm and similarity are, because you can use similarity to create rhythm, but rhythm is more about repeating patterns of content and design elements. And they help create a predictable and consistent user experience. So if you have things that repeat, if you have a certain rhythm to your site, it makes it look better and it makes it predictable. So for example, all blog posts will have the same structure with a heading, author name, date, image, paragraphs, maybe links at the bottom to share the blog post with your friends or share on Facebook or whatever. If all blog posts have that same structure, that same content, then those blog posts are not only going to be more usable because the user knows what to expect. They know, it's like the like button on Facebook. It's always in the same place. You know where the like button is because they use repetition and that rhythm you know where it is. And so if it was different on each one, it would be hard to know where it is. So it'd be harder to use. So again, rhythm on a site helps users identify elements that follow a certain pattern, and they'll know the actions available on that content. You know when you see a post on Facebook that there's a like button at the bottom of it. You know because they use that rhythm. Same for like add to cart button on store items. So if you've got a store, you want the add to cart button to be placed in the same place. Amazon does kind of a poor job of this sometimes, because sometimes different types of items have a little bit different layout, and I'm not sure why. I haven't been able to figure out what makes it so, but sometimes things are structured a little bit differently. But generally, the add to cart button is going to look the same at least, so you kind of know what to look for. That big yellow button, I think it is. And it's usually on the right, and it's usually kind of at the top by where the image is. Like, you kind of know roughly where it is, because they use that rhythm to kind of ingrain in you, okay, here's where the add to cart button is. So again, once this updates, it's been kind of slow today. Looking at our painting, there's obviously rhythm. Like, just the fact that there's, people, some people have umbrellas. Like, there's not just like one umbrella randomly. Like, there's a rhythm of umbrellas. Again, the similarity is kind of used to create the rhythm, right? Like the curves and the angles of things are used to kind of create that rhythm. There's trees in the background. That's a rhythm that makes it look more interesting and makes it look good. There's a rhythm in kind of like groups of couples even. People are kind of grouped roughly, so there's that rhythm that helps make it more interesting. So use of rhythm to kind of make it look nice. Here's an example from Twitter. So, Twitter and Facebook obviously use rhythm really heavily. When you think about this page, there's not a strong use of dominance, right? Like, there is some dominance, like the profile image and the, Barack Obama's name is sort of the most dominant thing, but also the tweets are kind of dominant just because they're centered. But there's nothing that really stands out on this page, right? Nothing's that much bigger than anything else. And that's because they don't really need to use dominance as much, because they're more interested in you kind of scrolling through the content, consuming the content. So rhythm is a lot more important here than dominance, just based on, thanks, Shrikar, just based on what the content is, right? So there's lots of rhythm. Like, there's, for instance, different, Twitter profiles are all going to have this information on the sidebar. Like, that's, always going to be the same. You know what a tweet looks like, and tweets have similar controls. They have the same buttons. They have, the date's always right here, and it's always in the same place. So as you kind of scroll through, you can quickly see what the date is. You can easily interact with it. there's over here when you see like an image and a title, there's always a follow button here. So like there's that rhythm. So again, there's use of similarity. They use the same colors. Tweets all look the same, but there's also this sense of rhythm that there's repeating elements, repeating content. It helps make it look nice. Like it looks well thought out. It looks well designed. Again, going back to similarity, like the margins are all the same. There's not like, different margins. So again, a really good use of both similarity and rhythm to create a really usable interface. Where again, they're not as worried about dominance. That MailChimp page with the really dominant heading, that's inclined, like their goal is to get you to sign up and to buy something. Twitter's goal is just for you to interact with it, to scroll, really. So they've got different design, different needs, right? Different goals. So their designs are different, obviously. If MailChimp had a design like this, that looked like this, it'd be really confusing, hard to use, right? But we know what Twitter is. Their goal is to get you to scroll their content and stay for as long as possible. So their design leads you to that. Here's an example with Amazon. And this is not, a great example. I don't know, maybe the add to cart button's over here or something. I don't know why that got cut off. But you still know roughly, there's still some rhythm in that, like, you know where to expect. Well, and even this is not a great example because you should know where to expect the little Prime logo, like whether or not it's available on Prime. But here it's like underneath the price. And over here, for some reason, it's to the right of the price. Presumably it's because, there's this change, it's on sale or something. But still, you can't quickly see by scrolling the page which ones are Prime. You know a little bit by the color, and that stands out. But I would prefer for, this Prime logo to be over here, too, so there's some consistency and there's some rhythm. So honestly, I think this page looks a little bit messy, right? Like, there's some sense in where, like, it's like, it's usable, but it's a little bit messy. There's content here that's product features, but then here there's nothing. And then here there's, like, manufacturer recommended age, and then product features. It's just, and it's different. Like, why is there an ellipsis here before these product features, but not an ellipsis here? Like, there's not actually very good rhythm on this page. The only rhythm is created by the images. Like, there's just these images, and then the headings. They at least have, a consistent subheading, but it's not a great use of rhythm, honestly. It could be improved. There's things that you could do to this design to make it look better. Not only make it look better, but make it more usable as well. So having the Prime logo be in a consistent place, having an add to cart button on here somewhere, having this be more consistent. So maybe this still says product features, but then it says none or something. Like it needs something here to make it look more consistent. And they shouldn't add this manufacturer recommended age above product features if it doesn't also exist here. So maybe they should move this manufacturer's recommended age down below the product features so it's more consistent. Product features is always the first thing after the reviews. Something along those lines. Again, it could be improved. I think Amazon suffers from just being so big and having so much stuff. And like this is a little bit different view than we see sometimes. And so they have so much going on. They're not very good at making specific views really, really effective and really nice to look. And maybe they don't care how good it looks because you're going to buy stuff from them anyway. So maybe it's not a huge deal. Here's a bad example. This is like a kind of an infamous bad website. A guy that sells cars in the UK. And there's no rhythm here, right? This website's a mess for all sorts of reasons. There's like, this is sort of the most dominant thing, but secondary and third dominance is really messy. There's really bad rhythm. Like he has like a testimonial, here, but then he also has some sort of testimonial here. There's not consistent spacing. Like it just looks randomly placed. It looks like he just said position absolute and then made up some numbers. Okay, it's here. All right, that's fine. Like, what's the stop button here for? I don't know. Why is it positioned here? I don't know. The only rhythm, the only nice thing you can say is at least like these links here have some rhythm to them and they're consistent. They're the same. But other than that, like it's just kind of a mess of a website. There's no good rhythm. It's just kind of crazy. And it's on purpose, right? Like he's doing it on purpose, I think. But anyway, an example of what not to do. It just doesn't look professional. I don't want to buy a car from him because I don't trust this guy to sell me a good car because his website looks like this. I mean, it's a reality. Oh yeah, here's some more. Again, example, like there's no good rhythm. Like, again, if you're gonna say anything nice, at least like he has like, here's his cars, and they have some of the same elements, but the spacing is weird. Like it would be better if these headings had a consistent spacing so that these things lined up rather than these being higher than this one. And there should be some more white space overall on these. Like it's just too cramped. It's too cramped feeling. Again, it's not a good design. Maybe it's effective for him because obviously he's doing it on purpose, but there's a lot of ways that it can be improved. Not even to get started on the color choices and the different colors and contrasting colors. Anyway, not an example of what not to do. Not going to buy his cars. Okay, so again, using rhythm, so we're organizing content into repeatable chunks and we're displaying them in a consistent pattern, right? So we're, taking our content, structuring it well, and displaying it consistently. We're also going to determine user actions on content and ensure that they're consistently placed within the content. So decide what you want the user to do. What are your main actions that you're driving people towards, and make sure they're placed consistently. Make sure your add to cart button's always in the same place so the user knows where to go click to add to cart, that kind of thing. Okay, so direction. We're doing our time. We're okay. If it gets to be like 9:20 and I'm not slowing down, let me know. So direction is what we'll use to guide the user's eye around the site. So we create some direction on our website to kind of guide the user's eye. Again, similar to dominance, but direction is just another strategy we have to kind of create some flow to our content. And kind of to each piece of content within our designated order, we want our direction to be thoughtful and to be on purpose rather than just random. So again, we're using direction to guide our users to a specific action. So like reading your mission statement and then seeing the donate button. Like whatever the order is that we want users to interact with the site. Like, the first thing we want them to do is read our mission statement. And then right after that, we want them to consider donating or at least see that they have an option to donate. So we use direction to guide the eye from the mission statement to the donate button. We can also use it to help users find information they're looking for. So scanning the headlines, then scanning secondary headlines. So like we want our main headlines to be most prominent, and then we might use direction to guide them to our secondary headlines or to some other navigation or something like that. So there's actually, some good direction in this. I can't remember if I have a, an article that I read kind of helped describe what the direction was here, but things like the direction people are looking kind of helps guide your eye a little bit. Like, just because of dominance, we kind of see this person first, and then because of dominance, we kind of see them this couple second. But then, you notice everyone's kind of facing the same direction. Like there's a sense of direction that kind of goes from here to here, right? Like it kind of like, you see that person, you kind of look over here, and then your eye just kind of naturally starts to float this way. Just because people are looking that way, there's a sense of direction. The shadows are all kind of angled that way, like it almost creates like an arrow, like, this section kind of like points this way. There's a sense of direction kind of from right to left. So, your eye is drawn to them, again, because of dominance, but then direction kind of guides your eye from there. Even this coastline, is angled, like it's like a big arrow almost. Just kind of guiding your eye across. So it's what makes it interesting is that like there's some really dominant stuff on the right, but then all the direction goes to the left. So it's like your eye's drawn to the dominant thing, and then it's guided to sweep across the rest of the painting. If there was no direction, your eye might stay over here. Like it wouldn't be as interesting if that direction didn't then kind of cause you to scan the rest of the image. So it's a good example of use of direction. This is Airbnb's website. They do a really good job of using direction. So there's dominance here involved as well, but they're, they kind of create this angle across the page. So like you see the smallest item, then you go here, and then your eye just kind of, naturally goes across the page to the search button. So they've created this, kind of angle, this direction across the page to help you see that search button. If it was, if it was different, like if this paragraph stretched all the way across, it might not create that same sense of just direction. But they've purposefully caused this, heading here to be not as wide. Like this could just be one line that went across the page, but then it wouldn't create such an interesting sense of direction. And even with their logo, like it goes all the way from the very top left all the way down to here. So they just use this direction to guide your eye, from, Airbnb, book unique homes, search. Like it's just kind of like, that's where you go. And once you get to the search button, you see, okay, cool, I can search, I can choose the guests and when and where. Like you kind of go from there. Another good use of direction that I think is important to point out is, they really purposefully created this experiences section, and these images, you get a glimpse of them, right? And I actually checked this with some different browser sizes, and it's really purposeful that they cause these images to kind of, you get a peek at them. You see, after you thought about searching, maybe you don't know where you want to go or you don't know what you want to do. They made it really clear here, like, hey, Airbnb also provides experiences. Here's a little glimpse of some interesting places you could go. Like, I wonder what those are. Like, and they're kind of different colors. You want to scroll down, right? Like when you go to this page, even if you don't know exactly where you want to go, they're giving that to you first. If you know where you want to go, if you want to search, boom, there it is. But if you're like, okay, like I just want to learn more about Airbnb, I just want to see some examples of what kind of stuff you have, they're clearly guiding you to scroll down here. They're creating a sense of direction by giving you a sneak peek of this content. That's a really good trick that I learned from them that I've been trying to use in my designs. Is like show a hint of content that people might be interested in. Show a little bit of an image to guide the user to scroll down. Like when you see that, you want to scroll down and see what these images are of, see how cool they look, see how beautiful they are. It just makes you want to do that. So you can kind of dream about where you could go, and whatnot. So they do a really good job. This is a small part of the front page, but it guides you to scroll down to see more. This is also a really good example of using direction. So like, a really important thing to think about with direction is where people are looking in images. So, Trump here is looking this way. He's even, angling that way. And obviously Trump didn't do this on purpose for this website, but they chose this image smartly, and they put it there smartly to guide the user to look at the rest of their content. If Trump had been looking the other way, one, it wouldn't have looked as good, and two, it just, your eye would go this way instead of this way. But they want you to see their most dominant image. So this is the biggest image. It's, the most dominant on the page. But then they guide your eye of, okay, where do you go next? Like, okay, well, I'm not interested in reading this story, but what else is there? They make it really clear the next thing you should look at are these secondary images. And then even these, the user's or the person in the photo is kind of looking this way. There's some direction to look at the rest of their story. So again, when you're choosing images, think about what effect the angles of the images, the direction people are looking, think about what effect it has. No, I don't have I saw a really good example of just, what it would look like if that was reversed, or if, all of the images went the other way. And it's subtle, but it has an effect. It makes your eye want to go the other direction. And then you might go here afterwards. Like if Trump was looking to the left and he was, pointing towards the left, the image was flipped. You know, you would see the headline, you'd see the image, your eye, rather than going this way immediately, might kind of go this way, and then you'd see these secondary headlines, which maybe that's not what they want you to see. They want you to see these secondary articles. That's kind of the second most important thing. This is maybe fourth most important. Like, most important, second most important, maybe third, maybe fourth, right? So like if Trump went that way and your eye kind of went here, okay, what else is on the page? You know, like you might miss this article entirely, but they've used this direction well to cause your eye to look that way. So again, even when you're choosing images, you should think about those things. Okay, wrapping up. So using direction, there's a couple of good examples here. Think logically about the order that the user should interact with your content. What should they see first, second, and third? Use lines, either literal lines or imaginary lines, to direct users to certain actions or content. So use, increasing sizes, use, lines as directional cues to guide the user where to look next. Use cues to entice the user to scroll or interact. So create momentum in your content. Show a little bit of some content that they might want to scroll down to see. Use changes in element sizes to indicate reading order. So if something goes from 100 pixels wide, then the next thing is 200 pixels wide, the next thing is 500 pixels wide. Combining that with dominance can help users see the order they should read that. And then here's some good articles too, if you just want to get some more good examples. I think maybe this one shows kind of the opposite effect with direction. I think, let me see if it's this one or not. Again, just these articles are just a good overview. That provides some more examples. Nope, I think it's the other one. Direction, controlling direction with images. Here we go. So, here's an example. These are BBC and CNN. But like this BBC example, it's a little small here, so you can't see it super well. But if you take a look just objectively at their page here, they've got their main headline, but then they've got like this spotlight section, which presumably spotlight would be kind of what you would want to look at next, or even just this content is also important. But with this image, like the direction of this image creates goes that way, like it goes up and to the left. Kind of with two things. One, kind of the angle created by these guns back here, whatever, sort of points that way, and then the person in the image is looking that way. So like your eye, like you see, they're heading here, you see their image, and then it just kind of makes your eye go this way, and then maybe you end up down here. But you might miss this entirely. I mean, it's not like you're forced to look certain ways, but it causes you to interact with the page in a certain way. Where if you look at this page objectively, you might miss the section here entirely because your eye kind of goes here, then it might go here and here, but you've missed the spotlight, which might be pretty important. Same with this CNN page. The direction all goes this way. Everything goes that way. So you might miss other important things. Here's an example of like where your eye goes on that BBC page, right? So everything here is kind of, you might see it, you might not, because your eye just kind of might flow this way. So I think they show the better version, here with the image just flipping the image to point the other way. Now, you see, okay, BBC, okay, this. Now you're going to be more likely to see this content over here because the direction that's created is less away from the page and it's more towards the content that you want to emphasize. So it just guides your eye better. It makes the content that they want you to see easier to find. It just makes the page look better too, honestly. Like, this image this version just objectively doesn't look as good. It creates a strange feeling because your eye wants to leave it. Your eye wants to leave the page because of the direction. So it's not as good of a design. It doesn't look as good. It doesn't look as cohesive. It doesn't look as thoughtful. But simply switching that image makes the page look better because your eye is more inclined to linger on the page. It doesn't create this weird conflicting, thing where your eye wants to leave it, but you want us to look at the content. So again, it seems kind of crazy, but it makes a big difference. And especially if you have a lot of content, you want to use direction effectively to guide people's eyes. Okay, we'll go ahead and call it there. We'll pick up where we left off on Thursday. I'll go ahead and post, the slides as well as the HTML5 stuff. And if you have any questions on your assignment, I'll stick around for a little bit. I'm happy to help out. All right, thanks, guys. How's it going?
Couple questions. So I'm having trouble with my